Wonderful to be here today, and I see a lot of friendly faces that I know, so I'm thrilled that you all made it. We have a wonderful, exciting panel today. We have about 45 minutes. We're going to hear about the investment landscape from our venture creation panel. We're going to hear about the elements of how to take it 0 to 1 and when you need to engage with a venture incubator. And so we're going to start with introductions. Let's start with Adam, and then I'll come back around to myself.
Sure. Great. There we go. Hi, I'm Adam Rosenwach. I'm the Chief Business Officer of Deerfield Catalyst. We are the medical device incubator of Deerfield, which is a Deerfield Management, which is around a $14 billion venture fund private equity house. I started my career as a music producer, and then through a strange set of events, I became a producer of medical device innovation, working with physicians and engineers with ideas. Before we were Deerfield Catalyst, we were Caridia, which is Mark Elfin and Howard Levin, most known for Ardian, which is renal denervation. They're the founders of that. Respicardia, Renal Guard, CHF Solutions. We've returned over $1.6 billion to investors. And then 2 years ago, we merged with Deerfield Management to become Deerfield Catalyst, and that's where we are now.
Thanks, Adam. Glen?
Hey, nice to meet everybody today. First off, it's a great honor to be here with such a distinguished panel. So I'll keep it simple because my track record isn't as polished as everybody else here. But first and foremost, I'm a husband, and so that comes first. And I'm honored to have such a beautiful wife at home, and I'm also the father of 3 kids. And so that's another accomplishment. I like to call myself a proud girl dad. Any other girl dads in the audience here? Yeah. I do have a son, but he loves his mom so much that I just kind of forget about him. And then the third fun fact about me is I love med device, and so that's probably why I'm here. I've got a pretty cool career. Started off at Edwards Life Sciences, mainly in the structural heart space and heart valves. So if anybody has a good idea in that space, come talk. I love to geek out over that stuff any day. And then also got my feet wet at a startup company called Cardiac Valve Technologies, where we competed with Edwards. They liked it, so they bought it, and I ended up back at Edwards Life Sciences. And then when the chief scientific officer of Edwards Life Sciences left to create NXT Biomedical, I was fortunate enough to join him 4.5 years ago, and it's been quite the journey. Currently, we're looking for early stage opportunities, but we'll get into more of that later. Thanks.
Thanks. David?
Hi, Dave Uffer. I'm the Vice President of General Inception in the Medtech vertical practice. I'm a pure addict, not drug. I've been a Medtech addict for about 30 years now. Have not found a digital app to cure me of that. I've been doing strategy and business development. The first 25 years of my career was with very large strategics, Abbott Labs, Boston Sci, Covidien, Medtronic of the world. And then the last 5 years, I was on the other side of the negotiating table in investment banking and an advisory firm. So about 6 months ago, while I had done a lot of corporate investing out of venture funds, I came into the General Inception practice, where we are a venture studio. We bring the first institutional capital into companies to help build them out, get them through an inflection point or a milestone where we can go back into the capital markets, place the next round of capital, and build them out. So we don't just write checks as a venture investor. We bring in fractional executives, help to be very operational with the portfolio to get them through this cycle of exit.
Excellent. Well, I'm Debbie Lynn. I'm VP of Partnerships at Caris Life Sciences. It's a diagnostics company turned tech company. I spent 15 years in pharma from a variety of different arenas, from operations all the way to venture, digital health ventures, and just a tiny bit about me. So why don't we start a little bit about talking about the industry, the landscape, the funding landscape. I know 2021 was a bit of an anomaly with a big blip in funding and capital raising. 2022 brought us a bit down to earth, although we're still trending up. So I'd love to hear from the panel what all your thoughts on, how is it to raise, maybe you can comment on that, and just in general trends. You want to start, Adam?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, for the past 10 years, the idea of funding a pretty pie-in-the-sky idea was pretty unrealistic in med device from what we saw. And what kind of this you hear the same things over and over again. It's fast followers, proven market, small changes. It's something that investors can quickly understand. If this works, what the return will be. They know how long it's going to take. That's what they're comfortable with. The interesting thing that's happening now over the past kind of, I guess, with NXT and over the past 5-6 years is a real interest in two things. One is this incubator model of VCs now funding incubators so they have deal flow because they weren't taking risks on these pie in the sky and new ideas, and they need that. Healthcare needs that. That's one thing. And the second thing is a growth in this tech transfer market and taking ideas out of schools. I think the barrier has gotten a lot lower to get over, to actually get ideas out of universities and into industry. And so I think it's a pretty positive change. I think it's always been hard to raise early stage money. It's hard now, but if you have something that you can clearly show the pathway and how you'll get a return, they're going to be much more comfortable with it. If you don't, there's this new route. I mean, it's existed for a long time, but a route that people are getting much more comfortable with and are excited about of incubators, accelerators happening in med device. That's what I see.
Thanks, Adam.
It's hard. Yeah. Should I expand upon that? Yeah, I mean, raising money, as Adam said, for a long time, it's always been kind of a difficult thing. I think, between the pandemic and what's happening on a global scale economically has really made that even more difficult. I think you see things like, traditionally it's been easy to, say, fundraise money out of China, and even lately that's been a little bit more difficult. But I think to Adam's point, what we're trying to do with these incubator models is look for what was previously alluded to, which is efficiencies, right? A lot of VCs, they have to get deal flow, and they have to spend a lot of time, money, and effort in order to capture that deal flow. So why not bring that process in-house? And if you know the areas that you're looking to invest in ultimately, you recognize where that need is, then why not try to build it yourself? And so that's what we've been trying to do at NXT and Deerfield Catalyst. And I think there's some nuggets of hope in there that we've been relatively successful in doing that. And so we're just kind of scratching the surface, though. And so we're excited to see what the next 5 years kind of holds for us.
Yeah, to expand on that, and even the last slide that we saw in the last presentation, we're talking about the efficiency in getting technology to market. At least that's a general Inception with many of these other incubators, studios, accelerators. We've got a lot of different formats now to help take these innovations and make them much more efficient and effective to the market, where the investors are, they've been a little frustrating, to be honest, where they're kicking the can down the road and always looking for more de-risking of that. Oftentimes we talk about the 3 T's that investors are looking for: technology, TAM, and team. And a lot of times the teams really aren't that established or that experienced. Great innovations. I've never seen a period in medtech where there's been so much innovation. I have to say the last 5 to 8 years, the innovations are incredible, but a lot of inexperienced teams, very bright people, but haven't gone through the process. And sometimes it's just repetitions, and other times it's great leadership. So I think this new model of helping these innovators navigate through this process is very warranted.
I think I'm going to push a little bit on the team since you brought it up, and then go back to efficiencies. I'd love to hear from all of you, what are you looking for when you look for people on those teams? How much creation do you do for that? Do you form? Do you pick people? Do you find a CEO that's sort of what they call like the lead runner or racer, and then build around that, or do you kind of let that happen opportunistically and then look for the team and bet on that team? What do you guys do?
So the team thing is interesting because in med device, it's not like tech where you want the cool kid in the sweatshirt who just graduated college. Like everyone wants this established team, which is kind of, it makes no sense. You want someone who's already done it 3 times, and that's your right person. So I have a real problem with that, and I think we look at things a bit differently. We believe in giving people a chance and providing guidance. And so when we're picking a team, it's more about, are they intrinsically motivated to get this done, to go out there and make a change? Are they going to work hard? Are they intrinsically smart? How have they proven that? It doesn't have to be in med device. That's another benefit. Not, I sound like I'm selling incubators, but it's another benefit of the incubators, having advisors and having people that have made those mistakes that can coach you, but then having a team that has the energy and the intelligence to think different when you need to. So that's on the team. And then in terms of order, the way we do things is we do start with an unmet need that we're looking at, and we will generally find a champion for that project, a person who has an idea and has already started working on it. And typically that person is the right person to bring that idea through the first 10 patients. And typically that person is not the right person to bring that idea after that. So when we're investing, as soon as we make that investment, we start thinking about the team that we're going to need after we prove out the physiology in the first 10 patients. And that's the order of how we think of things. Unmet need, de-risk the physiology, then we get the execution team. But we're thinking about it the whole way around.
Mm-hmm. Others on team?
I'd iterate what you just, and expand on what you just brought up. I'm doing a panel at the end of next month at an LSI conference, and I hand-selected 5 CEOs under 35 years old that are probably the most exciting CEOs because of that energy, the diversity of thought, what they're bringing to the team. They might not have the reps, the repetitions, and the experience in leading, but they know what they're doing with more guidance of people that have kind of run into some of those potholes that we see in medtech company creation. So I'm not saying I'm always looking for somebody that has been there and done that 5 times before. One of the companies I had acquired about a dozen years ago, the CEO called and said, you know, it took me forever to get my initial funding, and now I'm getting people proactively calling me and saying, well, what's your next company, because we want to invest in you regardless of what you're doing. This is rock star status just because he had an exit, but it was the same person running the same processes. And I think today's environment, people are recognizing that good leadership is good leadership, and they'll find the right advisors, the mentors, the people to augment the team to fill in some of their gaps. And that's what we look to do as well, that our model is to bring in a fractional executive to augment the founding team, to make sure that they have that experience in the room, and the guidance to get it through the next process.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, definitely echo what you guys are saying here. I think the other opportunity I just want to highlight for everybody here is even before that, right? If you just have a good idea, or not even a patent, just an idea, and you think that, hey, this could really change the way we do medicine, this could really help a lot of patients out there, there's a home for that, I think, within some of these incubators. So you don't necessarily have to even have a company, let alone a team, in order for make this work. I think the first thing you need to do is get the courage to tell somebody about it, make sure that you can trust them, and then, yeah, approach one of us. And we'd be happy to, if anything, just give you some feedback on it, and who knows, maybe it's a good fit for one of these incubator models to fold that into what we're doing. And we have teams already established that know how to bring things through the process very efficiently, very effectively. We have the network to be able to bring capital in and get these things funded. And so I would just offer that if you don't have a team, if you don't have a company, but you have a brilliant idea, yeah, don't forget to share it with the world.
I kind of remember when I was sitting within the venture fund at a large pharma company, we like to go early as possible, because at the time it was so expensive to go looking in Silicon Valley, and sort of the traditional rock star CEO companies were just completely priced out. And we would look as early as laboratory, scientists, PIs at different universities, and see whether or not we could build a company with them. And that PI was so important, besides knowing the science, because there's so many fantastic scientists out there, the collaborative sort of spirit, but also the willingness to kind of think about, okay, well, if I need to give this up to someone to take it to the next person to run with it, we looked for that to see whether or not, okay, could we work with this person? Because when we fund this company, we don't want it to get stuck in just stage one because of one personality who needs to hang on to everything. So as much as we looked for brilliance and concept, we also looked for how could we build that team around that person who eventually could be CEO or CSO or maybe some other member, or play a different team member at different stages in time of the evolution of the company. But you need that kind of special personality and ability to work with a lot of people in order to kind of start that.
Just to add on that, not to get too new agey on this, but I guess coming from the perspective of being a musician before, I think one of the greatest things we do as humans together is collaborate and create together. And we absolutely, when we are talking to champions, entrepreneurs of projects, we look for people who are collaborative and who don't have an ego in it, but just want to build something and make some kind of difference. That is like the most important thing that we look for when we're talking to people.
Okay, so I want to turn it back to 0 to 1 and efficiency. Now, when we build venture, or when we create ventures from the ground up, that is hard. And so thinking about people, value proposition, unmet need, TAM. Sometimes I remember you'd have to like squint really hard to see if there might be like all of those elements. How do you guys think about that? When should a person or a company come to you? Should they come at 0.2, 0.3, or 0? And how do you help them?
Yeah, I'd say for us, kind of going back to my last comment, is yes, it's hard, but we're not scared of too early. Again, I think you could approach it as early as just that nidus of an idea. Yes, it will be that much harder to bring it from like 0.001 through 1, but in a dream world, you would approach us with a well-vetted business plan, an amazing idea, lockstep IP. And you would want to collaborate with us, but that's kind of a dream Cinderella scenario. So I'd say bring what you have, and we can see if we can work with it. But we have to go through our diligence to make sure that we are meeting TAM, reimbursement, regulatory, clinical pathway plans, because we want to make sure that this can actually eventually get there.
Yeah, while we're in an academic institution, I don't want to say anything's just an academic exercise if you come to me. But I'm willing to look at anything at any point, but it's just an academic discussion if it's too early. So I need something that's actually been engineered to a certain degree, that I can actually take dollars in our $1 million and get a company from what's already been engineered from a device, or at least some form of digital technology, to an inflection point where I can then raise that next level of capital. So whether it's a prototype or something on, at least in a CAD work design, not just a concept and something on paper. I need some form of engineering that has been done to let me take it through proof of principle and manufacturability, bring in the dollars, bring it to FDA for a pre-submission, understanding that regulatory pathway, and then fund it through all of the preclinical and then through to commercialization. So sometimes feel like I'm a little bit dancing on a wire, but it becomes obvious when you know the pathway through to get a device through a development cycle.
Yeah, for us, we take a very active role in the projects that we take on. So my answer is a little bit different. It really depends what you want your role to be in this company. If you come to us with absolutely nothing, and you just have an idea on the back of a napkin and some papers to prove that you think it's going to work, we might be into it and then be like, okay, that's great. We'll figure out some deal and we're going to take over this project. Because if you come to someone with that, you're signaling that you're not capable really of going through the process of de-risking it and thinking through things. If you want to come in and run this project and really maximize what we're able to do, you're going to come in with a business plan, with some preclinical data that you were able to figure out some way to do in your university. You kludge together some kind of prototype. Like it depends what you want. So anywhere from 0 to 0.1 is when you come to us. We're still hyper early.
And speaking about roadmap, I remember sitting down with a lot of founders and saying, okay, well, great that you have this prototype, or here's your device, and here you might have 1 or 2 customers. What's your roadmap to the next inflection point, which we pointed out? And needing those steps all the way to the next inflection point, including budget, FDA sort of milestones, all of that kind of at least having talked through, thinking through those steps and how they're going to attack it in order to say, yeah, we're ready to fund you, we're comfortable with funding you. I'd love to hear how you guys think about that, if you actually help them map it out, if they don't know. Do you bring a team? Do you help with some funding along the way, even before like the full funding?
So we absolutely help map out where this project is going to go from beginning to acquisition. We also fund the seed phase, the first around $2 million to get. So the types of projects we typically do, you need to prove the physiology out. That's our biggest risk, is physiology risk. So we ideally try to prove that out on $2 million, and then we map out the trials that'll be needed to get this to an exit through a Series A, B, and C. Not to go off on a tangent on this, but it actually, there's a big problem with the way that Series A, B, and C work. Because oftentimes what de-risks a project to investors is not the correct path for the company to take to get to market as efficiently and quickly as possible. And that's another thing that this incubator model, once again, I'm just cheerleading for this, is trying to fix. Because if from day one you map out how can we align de-risking a project for venture capital with efficiently getting a product to market, that's how you really start to win and be as absolutely efficient as possible. And everyone wins.
David, have some thoughts on that?
I wouldn't say quickest path to market, but most efficient, certainly. Because sometimes I will take a first regulatory approval and go to market to prove concept, but I know that my real home run in the device is going to be the next iteration, but at least I can get out to market. And sometimes I'm going to put the brakes on something and say, no, we want to go to market with this form factor, and it might be a little bit longer, but it's going to make more impact. The ultimate goal is twofold to me. Of course, as investors, we need return on investment. So what's the path toward liquidity, whether it's IPO and we can have a liquidity event or an exit, or if the company founders are saying, look, I want to run a $500 million business, we have to think about the liquidity event. And of course, we're always looking at patient and impact into the marketplace. So I look at those. Efficiency is really the key there. And you were asking originally, what do we see when people come to us? I've seen a train wreck of a business plan to something that's buttoned down and I don't have to touch it. I'm not so concerned about that. Again, is it good technologies? Is there a good market? Do we have a good founding team that we can work with? And we'll really roll up the sleeves and help build that entire business plan. We can't invest if there's not a good business plan. It could be a great technology, but there's no market out there. we all know the major factors that we have to look at.
You touched on liquidity and exit. And I remember having companies come to me, and they started out as a Medtech company, as a diagnostics company, or a pure tech company. And then they said, oh, well, we have AI too, and this AI is going to be trained. And then so as we talk, it started sounding like not pure Medtech company, but more of a digital health company. And so then the question is, well, are you going to exit to Thermo Fisher or traditional medtech, or are you going to IPO, or are you going to exit to a Google Health or some digital software-based kind of company? And so the answer always comes to us like, oh, maybe all of them. And that's, you can't have, there's different paths to those different companies. They're completely different companies. So I would love to hear how you guys play a role in, do you shape that? Do you sort of encourage one way or another, or do you help them change direction? Because I remember helping change some directions in my role, so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the short answer is no, we haven't started to try to shape the landscape in that direction. I think I might be a little bit odd man out here, but traditionally most of our devices are dumb devices. So I think there's still room for us in healthcare. We have started to make remote patient monitoring, so that's kind of our first foot into smart devices. But traditionally, we're looking at kind of the big four in the cardiovascular space for what we're doing, and yeah, that's kind of sad. I wish maybe somebody in this room could create a fifth Medtronic, right? Or somebody to compete with those big four, because it is very limiting in terms of a liquidity event. It's nice because you have the same friends and you know who to talk to in order to get an exit. However, it's also not nice because there's only 4 people at the table.
It is a unique situation in structural heart, so I think that is quite an outlier. When it comes to looking at the path to liquidity, we need to keep people rational, and sometimes they put on the landscape of all of these different exits, and I think we bring our experience to say we strategically know who's going in what direction, and those shift throughout the years. I mean, we have to recognize that, but for the most part, where this is going to end up. We try to get aligned with the founders. These are the founders. They should own their destiny. And we bring in the advisory to say that, well, this is not possible. But if they want to IPO, or if they're thinking about to exit in 2 years, not 10 years, or as long as it's rational, we want to align with our founders. I always start, though, with saying, keep your endpoint in mind and march toward that, but always operate your company as if you're not going to have that liquidity event, or you're always building for an exit. You have to run a company. You know what your desired endpoint is and how to get there, and then the market's going to speak for itself. If there's value and the strategics are going to, you're not going to sell your company to them, they're going to come acquire you. That's typically what's going to happen. You can go to market and say it's time for us to be acquired, but the market will come out and acquire them. So think about what your endpoint, your goals and objectives are. Work backwards in building your company on the pathway there, but build it as if you're not going to have that, because I see too many people just stalling what they're doing, hoping for this acquisition, and then the timing's not ready, or sometimes the market's changed a little bit. Look what's going on in the IPO market right now, especially in Medtech. It's a sleepy year. And I don't know if Deloitte or the other bankers have projected when we'll come out of that. Usually they're within 6 months of calling that, typically. I'm always amazed at the investment bankers that can say, here's when the IPO market's going to open back up. And I think this cycle right now is as much an unknown as we've seen.
Did you have thoughts?
Yeah. So if you're asking, like, kind of molding people who are absolute dreamers of what they think it's going to be, that's kind of how I heard the question. Is people come in, they have kind of an unrealistic vision of what the company will grow into, or who the targets could be. It's hard, because you want to be an optimist and you want to believe that what you're doing is going to make a huge difference and could be this huge thing. We try to listen to people and understand where they're coming from and why they believe their product is going to do this. And we tell them what we found, and the types of people that we hire, we come to some kind of agreement that's somewhere in between of where this thing is going to go. Where this thing's going to go. So I guess that's my answer. I think it's a very delicate situation, though, because you don't want to ruin someone's vision and by saying it's never been done, so it can't be done. We get into a habit of doing that in healthcare because of the regulatory environment, and it's dangerous for innovation.
Yeah, I remember asking, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because you can't be, MedTech company, digital health company, everything all in one. And so then how can you chart your way back from, if it's MedTech company, what are the milestones that are required to kind of get there? And you need a very direct path to that. And so you're right about that. So last question, regarding regulatory, since you touched on that. FDA has been, they've been approving a lot of medtech devices, right? 163, something like that, recently. So, thoughts on regulatory and, especially with COVID and all those tailwinds, Adam?
That's totally not my area. I'm not even
Okay.
not even touch that.
Others, thoughts?
I've been encouraged by the regulatory environment, and with the Q-sub or the pre-submission process, at least you can sit down with the agency and have discussions with them and agree on a path forward. Mm-hmm. Where before is, okay, make your submission and we'll write back to you within 90 days and give you this challenge, and then next quarter tell you a different endpoint to hit. You actually sit down, they have to publish those notes, they come back to you and say, no, we don't like that plan, but why don't you look at this pathway? And I've taken many companies through multiple pre-submissions and finally get that agreed to pathway. You know what the challenge is, you know what they're asking for, and they give you specific direction. You might not like it, it might not be rational in your thought, but they're the ones who have the ultimate call. At least you know what you're facing. I'd rather be in the U.S. regulatory pathway than going through Europe right now, which is get in line and probably at the back of the line, which goes around the block 3 times. It's a very difficult and still unknown pathway in Europe. So, encouraging about at least the regulatory. When it comes to digital, that's still ground that they're trying to figure out themselves. Mm-hmm. And I don't think anybody's got the best answers for digital. And a lot of this new AI, which is happening, across every industry, right? Let's not get into a whole chat discussion on that, but VR, AR, all of these new digital realms that are hitting, they're going to make massive impact. From a regulatory standpoint, it's still get in line and have the discussion, and you figure it out together a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Excellent. One more question, because you seeded it for me. VR, AR, digital. What's exciting? I remember a time when diagnostics, everyone ran away from diagnostics. Nobody wanted to invest in diagnostics. And then here we are. So what's exciting to you all? Are there hot areas that you like to invest in? And anybody? Glenn? Adam?
We're not touching it yet, just because it's our value add is our experience in a pretty, I guess, narrow field of devices, pulmonary, cardiovascular, catheter. Like that's kind of our thing, and we just haven't left that yet in our business model. So we're really not touching that world yet.
Aha. David?
I love it. I want to get deeper into the AR, VR in specific case. I've seen great experience in user experience, helping clinicians be more efficient and effective. Digital, I think, is our greatest hope for MedTech to transform outcomes, but it's way too encompassing of capturing the data from so many different constituents, who owns the data, who controls the data, who will integrate the data and make meaningful use out of it. We're still pioneering and trying to figure that out. And that is the doctor, the institution, is it the patient, is it the company that generated the data off of their device, or the EMR? And all of those together have to seamlessly work in partnership, and I haven't seen us break down those barriers yet either.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, we just started to get our feet wet into kind of digital health, remote monitoring, and so that's been really exciting, getting up that learning curve. But we run into the kind of the same issues or concerns and we see it from our VC community as well, is, okay, here's yet another platform with another data point that needs to fit into all of these different healthcare systems, and how are you going to capture that? Who's going to manage that data? Is it going to be the physician's time? Is it going to be the nursing staff? Are you going to provide staff to analyze that data? And so, yes, data is king, but how do we manage that data so we can really act on it so it's meaningful to patients? There's a ton of value to be captured there, just commercially. But I guess what I'm really excited to see, hopefully in the next 5, probably more like 10, 15 years, is who's going to be the Google, who's going to be the Apple of digital healthcare. You know, who's really going to come in? It seems like somebody's just going to have to come in, capture all of this, integrate it, rebrand it, and make kind of an ultimate platform or two that is living in the healthcare system. It's just my guess, but excited to see what happens.
Interesting tidbit before we go to Q&A is I did an analysis of machine learning, AI-enabled FDA approvals over the since 2015. Predominantly, the first 2 in category, therapeutic area was number 1, radiology. Like almost 80% of approvals were in the radiology realm. Second was cardiovascular, and dribbles in the other areas. So if we could innovate more in some of these other areas, would be terrific. There must be reasons why it's radiology, but anyways, it's calling all innovators, think about other areas to innovate in. Okay, well, we have time for some Q&A. Anybody want to come up or raise their hand for some questions to the panel?
So what I was curious about is, are you working on with any hospitals or anybody in healthcare that's coming to you and saying, hey, we have these challenges, can you bring together a team of people, ideate around them, and help us come up with solutions? Because I know historically a lot of times I worked at an early stage incubator where we would get a lot of ideas that were just sent to us by one person, where there was just that one person's idea and concept, but a lot of times they were ideas that already existed, a lot of junk coming through kind of our platform. But I found that the more we could bring cross-functional teams together and ideate around these challenges, the better chance we had of bringing something to market. So I was just wondering if you're doing that as well, or are you only taking early stage ideas that are already formed?
I love that idea. I'll be honest, we haven't been successful in creating that kind of ecosystem or funnel into the incubator. One thing that has kind of just naturally worked out is when we go and do these early feasibility studies and clinical trials, we have physician partners that we work with, and we love physician innovators because they're on the front lines, they see the problems. We're here, we're the nerds that go and solve these things, right, and put together a widget and a business plan to make it happen. And so that's kind of the more natural progression. I will say that out of some hospital systems, though, we have licensed in technology that it gets created at these institutions. And so there's kind of 2 paths that we've naturally gravitated towards, but I love this idea of the healthcare system actually calling for innovation and us to kind of team up around that and create something useful.
Love to chat with you.
Yeah, and so we're East Coast based, so we've definitely seen this on the East Coast, especially university hospital systems. They've started to make these innovation departments where they're trying to aggregate all of this, and typically that's our point of contact there, because otherwise it gets a little crazy. So it's either them or key opinion leader physicians are who we are speaking with for innovation, and that's worked out great for us. It's absolutely a great way to look for projects.
Yeah, we don't take these problems and conceptualize and then build around that. And I wish there was even more of that, because I think it's a great need. Think things like here at UCLA with the bio design program, that's what they're intended to do, is go through the hospital system and find with these clinicians the problems and then come up with solutions to it. But we usually look for somebody who says, I've got a solution, and here's the problem. How do we operationalize this?
Another question? Oh. I think I saw a couple hands. Ah.
Hi. So obviously, most startups fail. So the question would be, when something comes into you, if it's a 0.1 or let's say a 1.0, and you invest up, $2 million in it to get it to Series A, what's the percentage rate where these actually take flight and become successful inventions, or what's the shutdown rate of when a company comes to you and you try your damnedest, but it just doesn't work, or it fails because somebody else did it better or faster?
I think you can set your success rate, modulate many different ways depending how risky you want to be. I look for about a 75% rate to get the companies that I invested funded at the next level. That's my internal goal. And then, of course, there's many levels to get through. By the time you get through to full exit, it obviously whittles down from there. But my objective is to assure that I can get the company funded at the next.
Speaking from a former strategic, generally you build follow-on into the equation in order to kind of see the company as far as possible. And if you run out of money, then for the fund itself, the strategic, then you bring others to kind of bolster that and take that company forward. So it really depends on who you have as your investor base as well, and where their vision is.
Yeah, I like your perspective, David, of, we can control what we can control while it's in our grasp. And that metric makes a lot of sense. I mean, the age-old kind of rule that has been out there is, 1 in 10 startups make it. And I don't think that has changed much over time. I'd love to say that, hey, the incubator model is going to be that much more successful, but I think time will tell.
Other questions?
Hi, I have a question here. Hi, I'm Jamie Fernandez. I'm a family medicine resident at Harbor UCLA. And in primary care, there is a lot of room for innovation. And I just, Debbie, I just heard you say that radiology is the #1 specialty with innovation. So I'm just curious, what are the barriers to innovating in primary care? And how can physicians present products that can be more successful in that space?
Well, I mean, we've certainly seen a lot of innovation from a telehealth perspective. So we've done really, really well. The comment I made was around AI-enabled FDA approval. So that's a little bit separate. But other comments on primary care and innovating well there?
I think primary care, because it covers so many different clinical conditions, it's hard to target in just one particular area. And I would say anything that's going to make them more efficient across the entire practice in so many different conditions would be something I would invest in. But it's hard to put your finger on just one. There might be much more office-based. And look, in device, many times we're looking at technologies that are appropriate for the hospital system and for whether it's OR or inpatient. And we have migrated now, especially people trying to push it more toward primary care or even at home. I think the market should be very active in that area.
Yeah, there was a recent report about Google developing a glucose sensor that's non-invasive. And that's coming to market, I don't know, 3 to 5 years from now, but there's new technology that seems to be working there. So a lot of technology in the home, where we're bringing primary care to the home instead of in the clinic or at the hospital. So I'm getting the signal to wrap this up. I wanted to thank the panel for a wonderful conversation and all of you for participating. Thank you very much.
Thank you.